Hello, in this video we're going to look at several ways to change or modulate to different keys. Let's start with the simplest, direct or phrase modulation. This is so called because it typically happens at the end of a musical phrase. The new phrase begins in a new key with no transition. If you want a cheesy air grab moment in your music, the truck driver's gear change might be for you. This is achieved by repeating an earlier section, but transposed to a higher pitch. It's often used to add a bit of drama to the end of a song, but it can be used wherever. Modulation doesn't necessarily mean changing key. We can change the tonal centre or tonic chord using modes that share the same chords. In the following examples, see how we use the subdominant and dominant seventh chords to establish the tonal centre. A minor, D Dorian, and so on. We can switch modes during a chord progression. For example, here we go from A minor to E Phrygian. Sequential modulation involves repeating a passage or sequence of notes in a new key for familiarization. We could use a sequence in a chain of regular intervals. We could then maybe use a B7 to land on the E major. Before we delve into chain modulation, let's look at some more options for landing on keys. As shown in the previous example, we don't have to land on the root chord of our new key. We could, for example, land on a dominant chord or predominant chord. The dominant chord in each scale wants to land on the tonic, for example. In minor keys, we can replace the dominant chord with a major fifth. In A minor, this is E. We could also use the dominant major seventh chord, which is in E7. We can also add a predominant chord to the beginning of the sequence. A predominant chord has a chromatic pull to the dominant chord. The supertonic and subdominant chords are predominant chords in our diatonic scale. Here we're using the supertonic, and the subdominants. There are other predominants as well. For example, the dominant or the dominant seventh of the dominant chord. Then we have Augmented sixths and the Neapolitan chord. We'll show these later on in the video. Chain modulation is a musical technique where a series of modulations or key changes are linked together at regular intervals. The ear gets used to this. Previously, we combined this with a sequential modulation. In the next example, we're just going up 3 semitones for each chord progression. Another example of chain modulation is to go around the circle of fifths. When you look at a chord, you will see that the chord clockwise is its dominant chord. Playing these chords anti-clockwise has a natural chromatic pull. And so on. To end the sequence, we could then treat the A flat as the fourth or subdominant chord in the key of E flat. Then you can go to the dominant major seventh of E flat, which is B flat 7. Then to E flat, the new root chord. Here it is played together. Using the circle of fifths enables us to see which chords are shared with other keys. For example, the highlighted area shows how E minor is in the key of C, G and D, or A minor, E minor, B minor. We can use these chords to change between the two keys. Notice how we're using E minor as the subdominant of our new key. This is a predominant chord in D. So next we play the dominant chord A7. And then we land on the tonic, which is D. In common tone modulation, we focus on the shared tones between the current chord and the target chord in the new key. Let's take a look at this progression that goes from A minor to G. The C is being emphasised to change from A minor to A flat major. The G flat diminished chord is being used to help us chromatically change down to the D7, which is the dominant chord of G. When we are changing parts of a chord chromatically, effectively we are changing the quality of a chord. For example, a major to a minor. Here we're chromatically changing up towards an inverted A chord, the dominant of D. Let's have a look at some other chromatic changes. Tritones can be used to help with chromatic progressions. C7 and the chord opposite the will, F#7, has the same third and seventh notes swapped around. These are dominant notes in a seventh chord, so the F#7 could be used to substitute the C7. In the following progression, instead of playing G, C7 to F, we're going to replace the C7 with the tritone F#7. Then, if we repeat the sequence, we can make the F#7 the dominant chord of B. Enharmonic modulation is a type of common chord modulation, where a chord in one key is also a chord in another key. For example, let's take B diminished. If you play B minor and flatten the top note, you get B diminished. If we add an A, which is the seventh note in the B minor scale, you get a half diminished. If you flatten this note again, then you get a full diminished, because this note is the seventh note in the diminished scale. If we invert this chord by putting the B at the top, we get a D full diminished chord. If we keep going, we suddenly have four diminished chords. The circle of fifths shows us which diminished chord belongs to which key. Let's take B diminished as an example and see how it chromatically resolves into the major tonic of each of these keys. As well as this, as we've mentioned earlier, a diminished chord is a predominant chord in a minor key. Here, for example, we're modulating from A minor to E flat minor. We could even chain these diminished chords together. Here we're modulating from C to F sharp. The German augmented sixth is also a chord that means something in a different key, even though it has the same notes. To find the root note of our augmented sixth in C, we flatten the sixth note of the scale, which is A flat. Augmented means to make something greater in size. We sharpen the F, which is the sixth note in the A flat major scale. It has a dissonant sound and wants to resolve. If we move the two notes outward, they land on G, the dominant of C. So we could use the A flat augmented sixth chord as our predominant chord for the key of C. To make this an Italian augmented sixth chord, we would add C. To make it French, we would also add a D. To make it German, we would use an E flat instead of the D. What makes the German augmented sixth special is that it has the same notes as A flat 7. The easiest way to find it is to get the dominant seventh chord of the current key and shift it up a semitone. The only difference between an augmented German sixth and an A flat 7 is how it's written down. We notate it with an F sharp as opposed to a G flat. Let's see this being used as a chord sequence. If I add an inverted C chord over G, you can hear how classical this sounds. Because this is an A flat 7, we can also use it to transpose to the key of C or away from it. Here we're going to modulate from C to D flat using the A flat 7 as the dominant chord. And here we're using the German augmented sixth to modulate into the key of C at the end of a sequence. The Neapolitan or N6 chord also acts as a predominant. To create a Neapolitan chord, we can do the following. Let's use A minor as an example. The second note in the A minor scale is B. We then flatten it to get B flat. If we make this a major chord and then invert it in the first inversion over D, you end up with the Neapolitan chord. The sixth refers to how far the root note is from the bottom note. The Neapolitan chord works best in a minor key. Let's see it being used as a predominant in A minor. Let's say we want to modulate to B minor. We take the second note of the B minor scale and then we flatten it. Then we invert it to get our Neapolitan chord, C over E. This wants to resolve into F sharp 7, our dominant chord of B minor. Here's a progression before modulation, in the key of D minor. The second time round we're going to invert the C chord to make it the Neapolitan chord for B minor. I hope you find this video useful. I'd just like to thank again for everyone who's either watched, liked, subscribed or left comments. It's really helped me to try and create better videos. Let me know what you think, and thanks for watching.